These are the lecture notes for Chapter 43 on animal behavior. Section 1 is on how genetics influence behavior, genetics or inheritance. Section 2 is on how the environment influences behavior. Section 3 is on the different ways animals communicate. And Section 4 is on behaviors that increase fitness. So a behavior is defined as any action that can be observed and described. Any action that can be observed and described. So what we have on this slide is evidence from experiments that suggest behavior has a genetic basis. In other words, that there might be genes that control the production of certain products that influence the behavior of an animal. So the first experiment is nest building behavior in lovebirds. These lovebirds are called, there's two different species. One is called Fisher lovebirds and the other one's called peach-faced lovebirds. And they have different ways that they build their nest and they carry the leaves for the nest in different ways. So if you look at I'll go back to the slide, but if you look at figure 43.1, you can see the Fisher lovebird, and it's carrying the nesting material in its beak. And then you can see the peach-faced lovebird is carrying the nesting material in its rump feathers. It like weaves it into its feathers. And I don't know if you'll be able to hear this or not, but you can certainly, this link is goes with slide 6, and you can certainly go to the PowerPoint slides and click on this link. I'm going to click on it now because I'm not sure if you'll be able to actually hear the sound. Okay, so for whatever reason that link isn't working, but so basically what they did is they had a Fisher lovebird to mate with a peach-faced lovebird. They crossed the two different types of lovebirds, and so what you call that is a hybrid. So the hybrid offspring between these two species had difficulty carrying the nesting materials, and that supports the hypothesis that behavior has a genetic basis. So once we crossed them, they weren't able to carry the nesting material very well in either of the ways, so it just supports that hypothesis. And then there's also experiments that are done with human twins, especially twins that are separated at birth. So there's been many studies. You can Google this. There's been many studies on twins in humans and twins that are separated at birth that are raised in completely different environmental conditions. But they end up doing things, making similar choices. In all kinds of ways, you see similarities. So maybe they select mates that are very similar, have careers that are very similar, choose similar foods. Like you may have one twin that works in healthcare as a paramedic, and another twin that works in healthcare as a physician assistant, but they both work in healthcare, that kind of thing. So that supports the theory that certain behaviors are influenced by genes. Here's our lovebirds again. And then we have an experiment on garter snakes and their food choices. There are two populations of garter snakes that were studied. One is inland population. The inland population is actually aquatic, and then there's a coastal population that's terrestrial. But the inland population just lives further away from the beach, but in like fresh water, and then lives in a freshwater environment. The coastal garter snake lives on the land near the coast. So anyway, the inland population feeds on frogs and fish. Coastal populations feed primarily on slugs. So when they cross these two different species of garter snake or types of garter snake, and the hybrid offspring would accept slugs as a food source in the lab. So that is another experiment that supports, and here's the data from the experiment. The inland garter snakes, percentage of snakes that would eat slugs is shown in this kind of golden brown color. And then blue is showing the coastal variety that would eat slugs. And it just shows you the tongue flicks per minute is what they measured. So when presented with a slug, the coastal variety of garter snake actually had a lot more tongue flicks per minute, meaning they were more interested. They were smelling the slugs, basically. But it doesn't show the graph where they did the hybrid offspring, but the hybrid offspring also would accept food, slugs as a food source, which suggests that this may be genetic. This behavior may be genetic. Now, there was another experiment done with marine snails. This means these are snails that live in the ocean, in salt water, and their egg-laying behavior. So there's a hormone called ELH, which stands for egg-laying hormone, in the marine snail Aplasia, and it's been isolated and demonstrated to control all the components of egg-laying in this species. The ELH gene, the product of that gene is a 36 amino acid protein. So the ELH gene basically codes for producing the ELH, the egg-laying hormone. And it has been shown that this gene is responsible for the egg-laying behavior in this species. What they do in experiments like this is they'll genetically engineer some of the marine snails to have the gene, and then they'll remove the gene from others, and you can see that you must have the snail must have that gene in order to demonstrate the specific egg-laying behavior that you see. There's also this one. This is very interesting, the one on nurturing behavior in mice. It says maternal behavior in mice is dependent upon a single gene termed FOSB or FOSB. Okay, so this gene, if it is present in the mouse, in the mother, then she will engage in nurturing behavior with her offspring. If it is not present, she will kind of like not really go around her offspring very much. She'll sort of abandon them, So alleles or versions, the different versions of the FOSB gene are activated by information traveling from sensory receptors to the hypothalamus. Mice that did not engage in nurturing behavior lacked the FOSB alleles. So, and you can see pictures here of, this is a mouse, a mother mouse that does have the FOSB allele. Notice how she's keeping her babies warm and cuddling them. And then you've got, it's kind of a funny picture. This is a mother mouse who is just totally hiding inside the hay, totally turned her back on her offspring. So she's not helping keep them warm or anything. And she lacks that FOSB gene. So we have a lot of different experiments that provide evidence that there's a genetic basis for behavior. So section 2 is on the influence of the environment on behavior. And we pretty much know that there's a component that's genetic and a component that's, based on the environment that influences behavior. So FAP stands for a fixed action pattern. So an FAP is an innate behavior pattern. That means it's a inborn. That is stereotyped, spontaneous, independent of immediate control, genetically encoded, and independent of individual learning. So I'll give you an example of a fixed action pattern, if I can. Actually, I think it's the emperor penguins. Okay, so emperor penguins, there's a period of time that the female sits on the egg, and then she gets hungry, and the male comes and sits on the egg. But it is so cold in their habitat that transferring the egg between the female to the male can it can cause the egg to freeze. If you've seen, what is that movie? Oh gosh, I can't know. March of the Penguins. March of the Penguins, which is narrated by I can't think today. Morgan Freeman. It's really good if you get a chance. March of the Penguins, narrated by Morgan Freeman, shows this behavior. It shows it's a fixed action pattern. We know it's a fixed action pattern because the penguins that transfer the egg, between the female and the male, they've never seen other penguins do it, so they didn't learn it. It's got to be something that has a genetic basis. But anyway, it's a fixed action pattern because there's a specific way that they have to do it so that the egg is not exposed to the cold. And they have to do it, they have to be very coordinated, and they have to be very fast. So fixed action patterns originally assumed to be elicited by a sign stimulus or a particular environmental trigger. And learning is a durable change in behavior brought about by experience. So pecking behavior in laughing gull chicks, they have this pecking behavior innately. I mean, they peck around, like kind of like a newborn human baby naturally has a sucking reflex, for the milk. Well, the gulls come out and they start pecking around, but look how their pecks are very scattered and not very accurate. But after they're 2 years old, they learn and they get a lot more accurate with their pecks. They peck. Their different pecks are a lot closer together. So the accuracy improves with time, which means that their environment is influencing this behavior. So it's a fixed action pattern, the pecking is, but it's also, they're capable of improving it with time. So it's definitely got a genetic and an environmental component. Let's see if this comes up. No. Okay, so I'll fix this. I don't really know what's going on. That's okay. But I'll figure it out and make sure that you guys have the links for these. These are just video clips of fixed action patterns. One is in a fish and another one's in the emperor penguins. But anyway, I will work on that and make sure you have those links, send you an announcement or something. Now, imprinting occurs when a young animal forms an association with the first moving object that it sees. So you may have seen this before. It's sometimes like a baby bird or a baby duck or a baby goose will be born, and if it doesn't see its mother, if its mother is not the first moving object that it sees, it can even imprint on like a human, or it can imprint on another animal, or even something moving like a ball, So in the lab, a sensitive period was defined as the period of time in which a particular behavior develops. So there's definitely a sensitive period with imprinting. An example here is that goslings follow any moving object after birth, even a human or red ball. And here's a picture of Konrad Lorenz and his goslings that are following him, that imprinted on him. And again, I'm going to work on these links and make sure that you have them. All right, another type of learning. So imprinting is a type of learned behavior. Associative learning is a type of learned behavior. It's any change in behavior that involves an association between two events. So we're going to talk about classical conditioning and operant conditioning. Classical and operant, and we'll do that on the next recording.